Hi, I'm Shana Marie Mejos and I am with my partner Miss Genevieve Senit. For today's video, we will be discussing the chapter of Indian civilization. But before we start, don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos. Enjoy! The civilization of India. From this chapter describes the development of ancient Indian civilization and outside forces that influenced it socially and politically over many centuries. One of the early river valley civilization developed in the Indus Valley of South Asia, the peninsula that is often called India. From the northwest of Iran, South Asia, there are a blended culture with Indus Valley traditions to create a distinctive civilization. Many centuries of Hindu dominance gave South Asia cultural unity. Also, many kingdoms were established in India. No ruler succeeded in uniting the area politically. When Muslims arrived, they introduced their ideas and customs, so different that the two civilizations remained somewhat separate from each other. First, Indian civilization develops. The huge triangular peninsula of South Asia is so geographical and culturally distinct from the rest of Asia that it can be thought of as the Indian subcontinent, although cut off from the Eastern Asia by the Himalayas. The subcontinent experienced many waves of invasion and migration through the mountain passes on the northwest frontier. Indus Valley Civilization. Great cities are built in the Indus Valley. In 1920s, archaeologist R.D. Banerjee found the remains of two great cities on the Indus River. In the early center of civilization are recently discovered in the city named of MOHENJO-DARO and HARAPPAN. They seem to have been one of the earliest people to grow cotton and make cotton cloth. The Harappan devised a standard system of weight and measure, or weighing grain and gold. The two major cities. MOHENJO-DARO. Harappan. Cotton for cloth and standard weights and measures. These cities and the society they ruled developed at about the same time as civilization arose in Sumer, flourishing about 2500 BC. The territory of the Indus Valley civilization was much larger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were carefully planned cities, each about a square mile in area. Wide streets are laid out in an orderly pattern. Buildings were square, with windowless brick walls facing the street. The Harappan engaged in trade. Many early civilization merchants used stone or clay seals to mark goods and sign contracts. Some of the distinctive Harappan seals showing that the trade was going on between the two centers of civilization as early as 2300 BC. There are the only surviving example of Indus Valley writing. So far, no one has deciphered their meaning. Writing system. Trading seals. Invaders and the Valley civilization. After 1,000 years of prosperity, the Indus Valley began to decline. When the people feared roving tribes who were attacking border territories, Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned. Harappa, 350 miles to the north, was destroyed in a sudden massive attack by invading Aryans. Pottery jars used for storing and stamp seals. Many of these seals show animals. The Aryans bring a new language to Indus. When Aryans migrate at the west to Europe as well as southeast to Persia and India, to all they took and settled the region as their language, now known as Indo-European. The Indo-European language that the Aryans brought to India became Sanskrit, the language of classical Indian literature. Early Indian history is unwritten. A series of dates and events did not become as important in India as it did in Western civilization. One of the reasons of India's concept of a constant cycle of deaths and rebirth. Since the Indians believed everything had happened before and would happen again, they did not important to record the reigns of monarchs and the dates of battle. Religious literature gives a picture of Vedic age. Vedas show how Aryans' life changed between 1500 and 500 BC. At this period began called Vedic Age. The Vedas were carefully memorized and passed from generation by telling and retelling. Learning the Vedas became part of the education of every upper-class boy and few upper-class girls. The Aryans priests were responsible for transmitting these holy books word for word. Nothing was to be changed in the recital, not even an ancient or syllable. Aryan society changes. Three-level class system. First, warrior nobles. Second, priests. Third, commoners. Warriors was chosen to be the chief or Raja, that he is the assembly of nobles, run the tribe's affairs. The class system was fairly flexible and people could move between classes. Male and female roles was clearly defined. Men made things for war and tended cattle, while women raised crops, wove clothes, ground grain, and looked after households and children. Although women had no part in the tribal assemblies, they still had some freedom, including saying and choosing their husbands. Small kingdoms were established. Not the Raja became a hereditary king, not a simple chosen leader. Class vision becomes stricter. The priest thought that each detail of a ritual or sacrifice had to be perfect so that disorder would not be upset and destroyed. In Aryans' beliefs, both human beings and gods were a part of a universal order. There was a great social gap between these three classes and the laboring class. The Vedic age sets the pattern for Indian thought and society. The members of each class had their own dharma, certain rights and duties, and a certain place in society. Dharma, set of religious and ethical duties that each creature in the universe is subject. Karma, the effect of the activities on its at man. Gradually, the Aryans came to regard class distinction as an important and unchangeable part of the universal order. Two religious thought shapes Indian society. Hinduism drew on many traditions as it evolved, but stayed flexible enough to be the dominant faith of most of the people of India. Religious beliefs and customs were the major force in everyday Indian life and society. The simple tribal religion of the Aryans developed gradually into the complex belief of Hinduism. Hinduism and Hindu society. Upanishads set forth the basic ideas of Hinduism. The Upanishads describe a world spirit or supreme principle called Brahman. Hindus believe that good karma assures a person of being reborn or a better life. Dharma or duty and karma are closely related. Hindus' epics tell stories of heroes. These tales of wars, love, and adventures, which are still well known in India, illustrate the virtues and the ideals that are important in Hindu life. The leading characters in the Ramayana, Prince Rama and Princess Sita, represents the ideal Hindu couple, the perfect hero and his devoted wife. Example of these are those Greek myths stories of many goddesses. Hindu art. Hindu gods take many forms. Shiva shown as fierce warriors. The bronze statue is surrounded by a halo, representing the cycle of creation, death, and rebirth. Hindu women have few freedoms. Hindu law and tradition set up certain expectations for both men and women. Some women, they were supposed to run their household smoothly, look after their children, and obey their husband without questions. A husband was supposed to give his wife as many luxurious jewelry, rich foods, fine clothing as he could afford. Buddhist shrines. As the Buddhism spread from India, shrines and statues of the Buddha became common in many lands. First, the porcelain figure of Buddha was made in China. Second, the temple known as the stupas. They evolved from mounds of stone placed on the graves of chiefs. To Buddhists, the stupa's base represents earth and the dome stands for heaven. Jainism. The Jainism devote themselves to self-denial. Many small groups with different beliefs sprang up within Hinduism. None gained the worldwide importance of Buddhism. The most last only a short time. The founder of Jains was given the name Mahavira. It means great hero by his followers. Unlike the Buddha, he taught that strict self-denial and life in a monastery were the only way to purify the soul and rid it of karma. The three Indian empires are established. Magadha takes control of northeast India. The kingdom of Magadha on the Ganges River, though not the largest in the region, was the most stable and prosperous. It had iron mines, rich the soil, abundant forests for timber, and elephants which were valuable in war and as beasts of burden. It also had a thriving trade up and down the Ganges River. The Persian Empire claims northwest India. About the same time, the Magadha was going stronger. An invading army led by the Cyrus the Great of Persia crossed the mountain into northern India. Alexander conquers Persia but loses India. Persian power in India ended as Alexander the Great moved steadily across the Near East. Extending his vast empire, he defeated the Persians in several great battles, then moved into India in 327 BC. Buddhist art. It is influenced by the conquest of Alexander the Great. At the right is a scene from the life of the Buddha, although the theme is Indian. The style of the sculpture as much in the common with the art of in ancient Greece. Chandragupta Maurya established a new empire. Soon after the death of Alexander, a young adventurer named Chandragupta Maurya took over the kingdom of the Confucian in northwest India and part of what is now Afghanistan. Azuka's empire. Azukas has been judged one of the great rulers in the world history. Modern historians base this view partly on the many rulings and epics that he replaced in public places for his subjects to read. The inscriptions appear throughout the empire engraved on rocks, in caves, and on columns. An age of invasions followed the Mauryan's empire. After Asoka's death in 232 BC, his successors were unable to hold the huge empire together. States far from the capital broke away from the empire. For about next 500 years, northern and central India were broken into many small kingdoms and states. Trade routes cross India. About the 1st century, the Kushnas of Central Asia made northwest India apart from their empire. By the time of Kanishka, the most famous Kushnas king, their territory extended through Central Asia to the borders of the Chinese Empire. Tamil culture is dominant in the south. The culture of South India developed quite separately from those in the north. Not even the huge Mauryan Empire invaded all the south, and none of the invaders of India reached the land south of Deccan. Asoka's legacy. The official seal or emblem of the modern nation of India shows 3 curly maned lions standing back to back. In choosing this symbol, the people of India called on a tradition nearly 2,300 years old, from the region of the great Emperor Ashoka. Trade by sea flourishes in South India. The Tamils were seafarers who traded with the Southeast Asia and conquered and occupied much of the island of Ceylon. Tamil kings built harbor facilities and encouraged trade. By about the 1st century, there was a thriving trade from southern India in sports to China and Egypt, then part of the Roman Empire. The Gupta Empire brings prosperity to northern India. About 320 after several hundred years of invasion and turmoil, the northern India was again united under one ruler like the earlier Mauryan Empire. This new empire was centered at Magadha on the Ganges plain. Hinduism influenced Gupta writers. Gupta literature showed the importance of Hinduism in everyday Indians' life. Advances are made in science and mathematics. Astronomy, mathematics, and surgery in Gupta India were ahead of the rest of the world at the time. Probably, the most impressive contributions were made by Gupta mathematicians. Invasion and the Gupta Empire. About the middle of the 5th century, invaders from Central Asia began to raid the border of the Gupta Empire. By about 500, the empire had fallen, and the northern India again was fragmented into separate states and kingdoms. 4. India comes under Muslim rule. Between 712 and 1526, different groups of Muslims invaded India. Eventually, most of the Indian peninsula was united under Muslim rule. Majority of Indian people remained Hindu, but the Muslim rule exerted a lasting influence on their society and culture. Muslims and Hindu beliefs conflict. The beliefs of Islam and Hinduism, however, different in their most basic principles. The Muslim believes strongly in one God and in equality among all people. Hindus were equally firm in accepting many deities as part of the world spirit and in seeing class division as divinely ordered. The two of faith could exist side by side, but they could not blend. The Rajputs hold back an invasion. In 712, the Muslims invaders crossed the mountain from Persia and moved into the Indus Valley. The Hindu Rajputs claimed to be the directions of the Kshatriya class of Aryans. Although many independent Rajputs kingdom fought constantly among themselves, they united to stop the Muslims invaders. MAHMUD of GHAZNI terrorizes India. Next invasions of India was launched by Turkish Muslims from one of the mountain kingdoms, GHAZNI. Its ruler, MAHMUD, was rapidly expanding his empire. He did not want Indian land, but he wanted the gold and treasures of the cities, temples, and monasteries. The Delhi Sultanate establishes Muslim control of India. The rules of Delhi were proclaimed sultans of India by the Caliph of Baghdad, and they remained in power for more than 300 years. At its greatest extent, the Sultanate includes the entire northern plain, much of the Deccan, and even parts of the south. Palace intrigues, revolts, and assassination brought about the downfall of many sultans. Mongol invasion set the stage conquest. In the early 1200, Genghis Khan led his fierce Mongol warrior across Asia, conquering and destroying as he established a huge empire. The Mongols then turned west and attacked many of the great cultural centers of the Muslim Empire, destroying Baghdad in 1258. The Sultanate became a center of Muslims' learning and culture. The Mughal dynasty begins. In the early 1500, Babur, a descendant of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, led his army into India. In 1526, the Delhi Sultanate fell. Though Babur died shortly after the conquest, he succeeded in establishing a new empire in India, called the Mughal Empire, from the Persian word for Mongol. Akbar introduces an era of toleration. Babur's grandson Akbar was only 13 years old when he inherited the throne in 1956. He soon gained absolute power and became a wise and skillful ruler. The Mughal Empire by 1700, the Mughals controlled more of India than had Asoka. Mughal art and architecture, close ties with the Muslims world influenced Indian art during the Mughal period. Aurangzeb attempts to conquer all India. Through their reigns were marked by cruelty as well as brilliance. The first three emperors held together an empire of very parts. As stricter Muslims than the earlier emperors, Aurangzeb tried to force the Hindu population to follow the laws and practices of Islam. Questions. How did civilizations develop? Second, how did influence Indian society? Third, what are the contributions of Indian civilizations? This is the answer for question number 1. Civilization developed between 4000 and 3000 BCE when the rise of agriculture and trade allowed people to have surplus food economic stability. For question number 2, there was an history that can influence Indian society as the tradition of Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism are all emerged out of India. And for the last number, the Indian was invented 0 and the number system, one of the greatest innovations in history. The decimal system, the value of pi, algebra, trigonometry, calculus, and many mathematical concepts.
We can do this para sa bayan at sa kinabukasan.